the Council then published its adopted mandate, negotiation directives, and the negotiation team, Michel Barnier, published position papers on the budget settlement, on the citizens' issues, on a number of other issues, published them in draft form as sent to the 27, and then in the final EU position paper form as sent to the UK. That obviously has also helped the unity, that transparency. I think that's on the EU 27 side. We engaged in public events. Michel Barnier engaged in very intensive outreach, also not just in Brussels, but in the capitals as well, where he especially also went to national parliaments and often had televised and public debates in national parliaments with national MPs on the state of play of Brexit, or before the state of play had started, so to say, on how we were preparing for the negotiations. So unity, transparency, two key principles. Thirdly, the repetition of core messages. So often in communication, I think people are seduced by the need to do something new rather than just repeat what had been said already. And I think if you look at the first 9 months, we said not much more, June 16 to March 17, than 4 words: no negotiation without notification. So please notify UK that you're leaving the EU, and then we can start discussing. So no negotiation without notification was repeated week after week on the EU 27 side. The issue of, there are priority issues, so there's a sequencing to the negotiations, citizens, budget, Ireland first, and then we can move to the discussion on the future relationship, was repeated ad nauseam by the EU 27. And was, of course, underscored again by a strong mandate from the European Council to the negotiation team. So again, the backdrop of the unity was, of course, very, very important in that. Then when we started the discussion on the future relationship, and this is where I wanted to show a slide to you, we hammered home the point of the single market integrity and what we would then, in jargon, would call the balance of rights and obligations. It was a very abstract concept that we kept coming back to. The UK and its future relationship with the EU, once it will have left, we will need to have a proper balance of rights and obligations in terms of the rights that the EU and the UK undertake towards each other, and all the obligations that go along with that. The obligations are, in other words, kind of the constraints on the autonomy of both parties. Of course, Brexit is a project of regaining autonomy on the UK side. So the issue of rights and obligations was at the heart of that discussion on the future relationship. And that is all quite abstract. And so Michel Barnier, who's quite visual in a way, said, well, I need a slide to show to the leaders in the December 17 Council. And the slide that is projected now, I think, or that people can see on their screens, was then the slide that we basically put together by saying, well, UK, you decide on your red lines, that's fine, we're not going to contest those, but then there are consequences that you have to accept. So if you don't want the Norwegian-style obligations, you don't get the Norwegian rights in terms of single market participation. If you want to be in a customs union like Turkey, there are constraints on your trade policy. So if you want your independent trade policy, you don't want to be under the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice as far as union law is concerned, you don't want to respect free movement of people, well then you cascade down to where Canada and South Korea are, which is basically what the Johnson government also deliberately chose as its model for the future relationship with the UK, with the EU, sorry. So it's a visualization of something rather abstract and complex, trade models, customs unions, and I think it worked very well to the point that it went viral in a strange way, because I was sometimes at conferences where a workshop leader would pull it out of his or her pocket, a British workshop leader, and would say, well, we have a discussion now on the options for the future, and I have a slide here that to guide our discussions. And I wasn't involved, and I was just a consultant or an expert or an academic who said, well, this is an interesting slide to start a discussion. So in that sense, it was circulating throughout Europe. It's not fancy graphically. It was designed by a few amateurs in our office. And there's no graphic designer involved in this. It was just a visualization of a message, which I think in the end worked quite powerful. It worked quite powerful also because as things go in communication, you do not control things. And on the UK side, people who were supportive of this slide says, well, our policy is a policy of what we would call cakeism, or have your cake and eating it. It's something we never said, something Michel Barnier never said, because that has an underlying accusation tone in a way, so we never wanted to engage in that kind of emotional attack on the British position, but it was taken up in the UK. And everybody, from the reaction in the room also, you could see everybody recognizes it, or the people who follow the Brexit debate recognized it. So sometimes things happen in communication. So unity, transparency, repetition. Final point, it would be parsimony and not communicating too often and too much. In the Brexit debate, I think that was important. There were moments when we spoke. There were moments when we as negotiation team were also quiet or relatively quiet, or didn't, in any case, want to make a big splash of communication. Michel Barnier gave key speeches, but they were paced, and they were not every week. They were not every month even. His first public appearance was in December 16, 3 months after having taken office, even though the expectations out there were massive at that point. The referendum was fresh, everybody was wondering, there was anxiety as well, what will happen with this. We kept a low profile because we wanted to prepare first internally before saying anything publicly. And we have kept that up until now, I would think. So it's sometimes better not to say things rather than to say things. And when we said things, it was often a repetition of what we had said already. And sometimes I went also to London to repeat what we had said already, and it seemed to be quite new for the audience, in spite of us having repeated it for 10 months in Brussels and in other capitals. So it's important to know when to shut up, I think, in communication. And in the Brexit debate, I think that became particularly important because sometimes the UK debate also needed time. So when new ideas came out, or when the government took a new position, clearly there was a debate within the UK. So there was sometimes an anxiety or a tendency on our side in internal discussions about should we not do something, should we not react? Because this clearly is not something that we will ever be able to accept, for instance, in terms of cherry-picking the single market. But even on such occasions, we kept sometimes a low profile, because you could feel that the UK debate still needed to unfold over the newest idea that had come up. And I think that's then also an important issue to keep in mind. So unity, transparency, repetition, and parsimony were the 4 principles I wanted to put out there today. Thank you.
Many thanks, Stefan. It was very interesting to hear about the interlinks between political work and communication, about such topic, such crisis, which is really unique in our European history. And I think for us, even if this is a particular case, we still can consider in our work when we saw heavy topics these 4 examples of unity.